Good day. Welcome to Westchester Talk Radio, westchestertalkradio.com, produced by Shark Creative, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built, by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk, also by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard, and by Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Kisco. We are joined here on the Sports Report by Frank Becerra Jr. Frank Becerra II, a legendary photography family and artistic family here in Westchester. Frank Becerra Jr. is going to be one of the newest members, class of 2022, to be inducted into the Westchester Sports Hall-of-Fame. Annual induction ceremonies this year, November 10th, over at Glen Island Harbor Club in New Rochelle. Frank Becerra Jr., welcome to the Sports Report, and congratulations on getting the call to the Hall.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for having me on. Pretty exciting.
When you got word that you would be part of the class of 2022, how did you react?
I was pretty surprised. I was actually shooting a lacrosse state championship game up in Albany, and Kevin Cook had called me in the morning, but I had not returned his message. And later in the afternoon, I was shooting a lacrosse game with Mike Doherty, our lacrosse writer, and he came up to me and he said, "Congratulations." And I says, kind of looked at him a little strange. I'm like, "For what?" He goes, "Oh, you didn't hear yet?" I says, "Hear what?" And he kind of whispered in my ear that I was being put into the Westchester County Sports Hall-of-Fame, which is pretty damn exciting.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were working for, as you have for over 40 years, for Gannett Suburban Newspapers, a.k.a. / Journal News, for about the last 15, 20 years or so. You were on assignment for the Journal News, which is where you followed in your father's footsteps with what he did. We'll talk about that. How did you get into becoming a photojournalist, which is what you are?
Oh, actually, I was going to be a fireman in White Plains, and I took the test. I was all ready for that. And in the meantime, they had an opening in the darkroom at the old Reporter Dispatcher, Westchester Rockland Newspapers, whatever you want to call it back then.
What year was this, by the way?
That was 1977. And I took the job just to hold over until the fire department position opened up. And then I started getting into it and hanging out with other photographers. I would work the darkroom at night. That's what my job was, developing other people's film and printing their pictures, other photographers. And during the day, I would actually hang out with some of the photographers on their assignments. I would go with them on assignments. And I learned the trade that way. I mean, that's can't do it any better than being with the person, watching him do it, and learning the way they do it. And worked out pretty well for me.
Now, your family, you talk about you were going to be a fireman. Your family is in the services. You have a brother who's been a state trooper for decades up in Lewisboro, in the barracks up there, right?
Yeah, my brother Joe. He just retired a few months ago.
Yeah, I had heard about that he had retired. Yep. So you have that service realm of the family too, state trooper, fireman, etc. And you got the artistic realm. Tell us about your brother, Billy Becerra.
Billy Becerra is probably the only one that can follow in my father's footsteps a little bit. He's quite the artist. I can't draw a straight line, but Billy's got some talent, and he's proven it today. He's doing very well.
Yeah, he's been with the Journal News for decades too, and he's the guy who produces the portrait for the Hall of Fame inductees every year. So he'll do a portrait of you.
Yep, he's been asking me to send him a picture. So,
are you going to work with him on the portrait? Tell him to do a little bit of this, a little less of that.
Well, initially I sent him one of my high school photos, and he says, "No, that's not going to work. It's going to be a little bit more recent." So, yeah, he'll do right by me, I hope.
That's funny you say that, because right behind me here on the floor, I have a couple of big framed pictures of my high school days and early college days. I look at those and I look at today, and, people say no matter what you do, we always know it's you. Shaved head, big afro, beard, no beard, mustache, goatee. We always know it's you. Would we always know it's you from back then too?
Yeah.
Yep. So we know that's Frank Becerra Jr. back in high school too. Look at you today. We know that's still you.
Yeah. Changed
Tell
a
us
little
about
bit.
how you followed in your father, for example, was inducted into the Hall of Fame back in 1982. He and I were great friends. He passed away in 2009. He was a legend around Westchester and the tri-state area and the sports industry as an artist and a photojournalist in his own right. How much of an influence did he have on you? Obviously, what you do, a lot of that came from him.
Well, growing up around him and around his friends, and in seeing the news business and going into his office after school when they used to be on when the Westchester Rockland newspapers and Reporter Dispatch used to be on Church Street downtown White Plains. I would remember walking from St. John's School to my father's office and spend a couple hours in there after school before I would get a ride home with him, and just seeing the way the newsroom operated and the hustle and bustle and everything, everybody moving around and nonstop. It's pretty exciting to watch. Granted, this was back in the early 70s when Westchester Rockland newspapers had 5 floors of an office building in downtown White Plains loaded with staff, and it just seemed exciting to me. And when Plan A didn't work out, that was going to be my Plan B, and luckily for me, it worked out.
Mm-hmm. What high school did you go to?
I went to Stepanek High School.
You went to Stepanek High School, so
Yes,
you
I
are a
did.
Crusader.
All my brothers. Yep.
Right. Yep. You are a Crusader. I know your father was tied to the White Plains community in just so many ways, especially his old good friend Harry Jefferson.
Oh yeah, they were good buddies.
Yep, they were good buddies. They always came to the Con Ed Sports Award luncheon every week together for many, many years. They hung out together. They had their own kind of comedy routine back and forth where they would jab each other a little bit. The Con Ed Sports Award Weekly back then, it's kind of like a roast of guys a little bit also, too. Besides honoring the Student Athlete of the Week, we get on each other a little bit. And your father and Harry had their own way of going back and forth at each other, and yet they'd come to the luncheon together and go home together every week, too.
Yeah, my father looked forward to Wednesdays just for, especially after he retired, just that look forward to seeing those bunch of guys and hanging out and sharing laughs. And yeah, that was a good time for him.
So as you came up through the years and coming up through the system as a photographer, as a photojournalist, talk about some of the events you got to cover.
Oh, I was fortunate. I did a lot of high school sports just starting out, and that propelled me into doing higher level sports, which ended up being pro sports. And did pro sports for quite a while. I was the beat photographer. I covered the Yankees. I covered the Mets. I covered whatever game was going on in New York that night. I basically covered it. In addition to that, I also chased news, which was an important part of the newspaper business. And here I am over 40 years later. I'm not doing pro sports. I'm doing high school sports, but I'm doing that and still chasing news.
Memorable moments for you through the years.
Oh boy.
We might have to do a 6-hour show for
Yankees World Series, Rangers holding the cup at the Garden after beating the Canucks, Giants Super Bowls. There's a bunch of them. So it's been a good run.
Yeah, you covered 3 Stanley Cup championships, NBA championships, also World Series, numerous World Series, and Super Bowls, obviously, too, through the years. If there's one moment that stuck out for you that when you look at every photo you've taken, and you've taken tens of thousands of them through the years, what would, if you had to pick a particular photo of yours, which one stands out the most, or maybe top 3?
Whoa, man, that's a tough one. I got to think a little bit on that. A photo of Parcells being carried off after winning the Super Bowl in Tampa. Pretty memorable. He's being carried by Lawrence Taylor and Carl Banks. That one sticks out. The Summer Olympics. I was fortunate enough to do the Summer Olympics in 1992. Yeah, when local girl Leah Lovelace was the swimmer from Yonkers, and I got to go out to Barcelona and cover her out there. So her getting the gold medal put on her after winning the backstroke was pretty high up there in the moments, especially since I spent some time with her and her family leading up to the Olympics, and then seeing her win. That was pretty cool.
How much can you plan what you shoot? Or do you always have to be just ready to go, spur of the moment, like a reporter who's on an event or at an event, and you get a call from back at the station, hey, you're on now. Well, I was just going to go to the men's room. No, you're on now.
Yeah. Where in this business it's basically 24/7. You have a schedule and you work by the schedule, but the news business, anything can happen anytime. And you could be 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning and jump up and get dressed and go out and do what you got to do. I still, like I said, I've been doing it over 40 years and it's still pretty exciting.
How much does instinct play a part in what you do? You're at a game, you're at an event, you see it could be a close game, it could be a championship game, it could be a blowout, yet in a blowout, things happen, for example. How at the ready, at the go do you need to be even during a blowout? Like, for example, I go cover an event, people want to come and talk to me, and I'm not being rude if I try to slide away. People need to understand that guys like you and I have a job to do, and that's what we're there for. We're not there to shoot the breeze. We can always go for a beer later on.
Yeah. When a game's a blowout, when somebody's winning by a couple touchdowns or by a lot of points or a lot of runs, it's actually easier. You're a little bit more relaxed. But when there's a tight game, it's a 7-7 football game, and the winning touchdown is going to make a difference. That's when the pressure's on, because you got to get that shot. They want that shot, the winning catch in the end zone, the winning run up the middle for the winning touchdown. Even baseball, which, sorry to say, I find kind of boring to photograph. If you have a pitcher's duel, there's really not a lot of action. But a walk off in a baseball game, you really got to be on top of your game. You got to be ready. Anything that could happen. So, like I say, if it's a blowout, you're a little bit more relaxed. But if it's close, you're on your toes. You want to be in the right spot. If it's a football game, you're saying, well, should I be in this side, or should I be in that side, or should I be in the end zone? You have a lot of options, but you got to make the right call.
Mm-hmm. And basketball game, for example, coming down to the wire, key 3-point shot. Somebody drives the lane near the end, gets fouled, and it could be a significant foul. Maybe you want to make sure you got a shot of that. Hockey game, for example, coming down the end, tight game or in overtime. You want to make sure you got a shot of that game-winning overtime goal.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you talk about basketball. I remember one Indiana Pacers against the Knicks in the playoffs when Reggie Miller sent everybody home crying with a 3-point shot at the buzzer. You got to get that picture. Sometimes you can't, especially in basketball. You're sitting on the floor underneath the basket, and if there's nobody in your way, then you can get a clean shot. But there could be a defender in the way, there could be another player in the way, there could be a referee in the way. But it's a lot of pressure, but it's fun.
Have you ever said to anybody, especially a referee, maybe, hey, can you slide this way? I need to get this shot.
Yeah, they'll turn around and laugh at me and not move at all. They don't
bring
care.
Up an interesting point.
They have their job to do. They have their job to do, and they're really not worried about me. So, but usually they're
bring up an interesting point about trying to get the right spot, at a venue. I, for years, say covering the Jets and Giants for CBS Radio, for WCBS 880 in the city. Covering the Jets and Giants for a number of years, the home games, you always had to work to get to the right spot, to maybe catch a play, watch a play, maybe get to a player to talk to them. And you had to deal with security, especially after 9/11, the way the security ramped up and intensified, and security would sometimes let you know you cannot be here. And like you said, you got a job to do, and you got to work with security to reach a happy medium to let them know, I have to be here, or you may not see me here ever again, which for me, as one security guy once indicated, that might be a good thing for us here.
Yeah, well, it's true. Security, especially Yankee Stadium security, especially after 9/11, was probably the toughest, and rightly so. No one knew what was going to happen, and you want to be smart. But here's the thing. After covering so many games for so long, you get to know the security guys. They get to know you, and they remember you, and you might turn them on to a picture here and there and make them happy. And they'll, if they know you and they know you're there to do a particular job, and you say, listen, just let me jump into that spot for 2 or 3 pitches. I just got to get this left-handed pitcher from this angle or something like that. And like I say, they know you. They usually work with you.
Yeah, I remember a guy I eventually befriended at the old Meadowlands for Jets and Giants games, and he would see me say, let's go. And he would make sure that he got me into the spot wherever I needed to go. Like you point out, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting the way you have to make friends along the way to do what you have to do too. when you work as a journalist or you do anything that is media related. You do need some friends in certain places as you go along to help you get to where you want to go to, too. There's no question about that. How about when you deal with coaches, for example? When you talk about Parcells and the way he was carried off the field after a Super Bowl victory down in Tampa by LT and by Carl Banks, how open were coaches to you? Have they been along the way at every level, knowing you have to do what you have to do? Or let's say, we get out there in a Section 1 game. You're a photojournalist. I do a lot of public address work around Section 1. We have to be able to work with coaches and athletic directors at these venues, too, for us to do what we need to do and get the information we need.
Usually the ADs and the coaches are pretty good. They, like I say, they understand we have a job to do, and they want to make their school or their players or their team out in a good light. So they usually work with us. They're pretty good. I have some problems every now and then with the Pleasantville High School football coach, who happens to be my younger brother, Tony.
Yeah, right.
But I work around that every now and then.
Yeah, I forgot about him for a moment, that he's over at Pleasantville. I saw him. He came over to say hello at the Hall of Fame a couple of years ago after we wrapped up one night. Yeah. And you talk about security and the way it's been after 9/11, especially at the Yankee games. One thing that always caught my eye was the way after 9/11, George Steinbrenner had to walk around with the big ID tag around his neck. So George Steinbrenner walking around, and he had the biggest ID tag back then, too. Yeah. Until he passed away. There was no question about that. But that always impressed me, that if Steinbrenner has to wear that, I'd better keep my shirt on too at that point. So,
that's for sure. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah. Now, your father was inducted back in 1982, Frank Becerra Sr. You and him will become part of a set of very few, less than a handful of father and son combinations in the Westchester Sports Hall-of-Fame. How special is that to you to follow in his footsteps?
Boy, I can't even explain how special that is. I wish he was here to see it, but I'm sure he's watching down, and he's just as happy as I am.
Mm-hmm. And we know he was a special guy, loved by everybody he came in contact with. He had a special way about him, about connecting with people, and everybody respected him for what he was, not only what he did, but for what he was as a person and as a human being, too. And you could especially see that in the trade-off with Harry Jefferson every week, the way they'd go at it, and yet they were the best of friends. And I guess you got to be best of friends to be able to go at it like that, the way those two did.
Yeah. It was, they had a special friendship. And myself, I'm making a lot of friends along the way also. So it's all good.
Right. Yeah, I tried. After over 40 years, I'm still trying to make friends. I'm still working at that. I got to follow you and your father and those footsteps there about how to do it. No question about that.
Come on, John.
Frank Becerra Jr., congratulations on your selection for the Westchester Sports Hall-of-Fame. You'll be inducted on November 10th at the Glen Island Harbor Club in New Rochelle. Class of 4 going in here in 2022. Variety of other Westchester sports notables, one-time Lakeland High School and Syracuse University. The lacrosse legend Rick Beardsley will be inducted that night, too. Sprain Lake Golf Course in Yonkers, longtime pro, almost 70 years. Tom Avezzano gets the call. And a guy you and I both have known very well through the years, White Plains football star who played under Harry Jefferson at White Plains High School, championship Valhalla High School coach, and he was a great amateur boxer and a well-known boxing trainer of some pretty big notables in the 80s and 90s. Our good friend Ron Berlingo, quite a distinctive class you'll be going in with too here in 2022. Frank Becerra Jr., our congratulations again and regards to the entire family.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you on. And again, congratulations to the entire family on all you've done, everybody through the decades for the Westchester sports community and the community overall.
Thank you, John.
Frank Becerra Jr., class of 2022, Westchester Sports Hall of Fame, Westchester Talk Radio, The Sports Report. I'm John Marino. We are produced by Shark Creative, made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built by Michael Labriola, landscape design and construction of Armonk, also by Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth to a fiduciary standard, and by Jaguar Land Rover of New Rochelle, White Plains, and Mount Kisco. Catch all of our Westchester, Rockland, Putnam and Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Shark Creative YouTube. Download our app. It's called Westchester Talk. Take it with you every place you go. And now, yes, we are on Apple Podcasts, too.